What's up, guys? Welcome today to the podcast. And before you start pressing that fast forward button, which some of you guys might do that to avoid the, you know, sponsorship stuff that we put in there, I want to let you guys know that we extended the Origin Gi order for one last week. It was just a couple people had some problems getting stuff on the website, and so I wanted to just extend it for people maybe who are in a similar situation. So we'll be extending it till Friday the 30th. So originally it was going to be Friday the 23rd. We're now going to do Friday, September the 30th. So just a heads up on that. And again, today's podcast is going to be primarily about some ADCC reflections, just some ideas to chew on. We'll share basically thoughts on the whole thing and some interactions that we had and some of the stories from the ADCC that maybe you guys would find interesting, and also share some ideas with you about maybe watching some of those matches and understanding what was going on, because there were a couple of matches where people, I think, they didn't really know what was going on. And I think that there could be some valuable lessons from it. And so we'll get into those as well. So hope you guys enjoy this podcast. And again, if you haven't pressed fast forward, then I appreciate you. But again, as always, thanks to our sponsors for helping make this darn podcast happen and bring it to you every week. And big thanks to Charlotte's Web for helping make the podcast happen. If you guys have never tried CBD products before, I encourage you to try them. You can use whatever brand you like. They're out there. But again, just keep in mind that the fact that that CBD is not regulated by the FDA means that, it can be whatever, there can be all kinds of wonkiness going on in that bottle or in that gummy pack or whatever that you get. And again, I'm a big fan of companies like Charlotte's Web, who are, they put their products up to a quality that is not even regulated for their product, meaning they go above and beyond what's actually required for them to bring their product to market. They do this primarily because eventually it will be FDA regulated and they'll be in a perfectly good position to do so. And it's also because, if you've ever listened to the mission, they originally created that product for a girl named Charlotte. And you can read about that. It's a really interesting story. And so basically the whole message behind the company is if we wouldn't give it to this young girl that was dealing with seizures and all this stuff, right, then we can't put it in the bottle, right? And I think that's a pretty cool thing. I remember listening to like Jocko and those guys at Origin talk about the same thing. They were, to their employees, they're like, look, this wasn't in public. This, by the way, this was like in both cases, I've heard the employees talk to each other in this manner, right? That, hey, listen, if we wouldn't give this to our families, we won't put it in that bottle or in that can or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I like dealing with companies like that. And again, Charlotte's Web is one of those companies. They make a top-notch CBD product, and CBD is one of those products that I love for my recovery. And so again, if you would like to check them out and try it for yourself and see what kind of effect it has on you, you can do so by going to their website at charlottesweb.com, and you can use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order, and give it a whirl for yourself and see what kind of effect it has on you. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Matt at Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is their website. And Matt sells a lot of really cool jiu-jitsu gear. Again, everything from t-shirts and shorts and no-gi rash guards to gis and fanny packs. I mean, you name it, he's probably got it. And again, if you're in the market for some cool jiu-jitsu shirts, check them out. Again, most of the time, if you look at any of my videos or any of my posts, if you see a shirt that is not specifically my jiu-jitsu shirt, it's probably his. And I don't necessarily do it for marketing purposes. I mean, it doesn't hurt, obviously, but like I tend to have a uniform, if you will, every day. And that uniform is either a jiu-jitsu shirt of some sort or a jiu-jitsu shirt, right? And so I wear one of those and pretty much every day. And generally, like when it comes to the way that they feel, the comfort of them, and the actual look at the shirts, I like Epic Roll's stuff. So I tend to wear it a lot just because I like it. That's kind of how I do things anyway. Like I remember I was going by the We Defy booth, and I'm a big fan of the We Defy company and the program that they put together for veterans. Now, I'm not a veteran, and I have absolutely, I don't get any kickbacks from them or any sort of monetary entanglements whatsoever. I just like the rash guards. I think they look cool and they're comfortable, so I wear them. And they were like, appreciate that. And again, that's kind of how I work. If I don't actually like the product, I don't use it. I don't talk about it. And with Matt's products, I like them. So again, I share them with you guys in different ways. And again, if you guys want to check out some of his stuff and try for yourself, you can go to epicrollbjj.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off on the order. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly and get your hands on a couple cool bonuses, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And upon joining, you'll get some cool, like, exclusive extras that we can include. Like, we did a little vlog that there will be some vlogs and stuff like that from the ADCC posted on my YouTube channel, but there will also be some behind the scenes stuff that won't be posted on YouTube. You can get that at our Patreon, which we'll be releasing soon. And whenever you join the Patreon, you'll get access to a couple cool things. One in particular, which I think is really good, is a warm-up routine that Eugene did. So a lot of people want a particular routine that they could use maybe for a warm-up at a competition when they don't have anybody to warm up with, or maybe they want a warm-up routine for themselves for training, or maybe they want a routine that would help improve their mobility for very specific muscle imbalances that jiu-jitsu practitioners have, right? This is something that a lot of us run into. And Eugene, I had him do a warm-up routine with people that came to my jiu-jitsu camp recently. He went through the warm-up routine with them. It's about 20-25 minutes, went through the whole routine, showed them how to do stuff, and everybody at the camp immediately was like, oh my god, I feel so much looser, my body feels so much more mobile. And again, it's really good. So again, if you guys would like to get your mangled jiu-jitsu hands on that and loosen up those hips, help that low back, those shoulders, and everything else that gets mangled from jiu-jitsu, then go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And when you join our Patreon, you'll get access to all that exclusive content. And as an added bonus, you will get access to that warm-up routine upon joining. And guys, last but not least, if you would like to join my Chew Crew email list, you can do so by going to my website at jujitsu.net/join, JOIN. Upon joining, you will get 3 free ebooks, and you will get my daily email newsletter that I send out to people with everything from philosophical ramblings to training tips to exclusive offers that I don't send anywhere else. So again, you can check that out. And guys, with that said, let's jump into today's podcast. So at the time of recording this, I don't know when you're listening to this, but at the time of recording this, we just got back from the ADCC 2022 World Championships, and it was by far like the coolest jiu-jitsu event I've ever been to. And again, I've been to a lot. I've been training since 2003 and I've been competing since 2003, and I've been to a lot of events. And I mean, it was hands down the best event I've ever experienced, and it was the biggest event I've ever experienced. It was really, really entertaining. It was something special. It really was. And so what I figured we would do today is go through some just different reflections and different ideas about the ADCC, both good and bad, and kind of get into it. Just sort of just a disclaimer. If I talk about anything that maybe I didn't care for, understand it's not a dislike for the ADCC. I think the organization did a great job, but there's always things where, it's just like jiu-jitsu. You can do a good job and always want to do better, or you can always do certain things to make things better. And when I say better, I'm talking about more of making it more palatable to a wider audience. Because again, if we want jiu-jitsu to grow, the competitions are going to have to be a little bit more palatable to people to watch who aren't the most hardcore competitors. Wrestling is like this as well. You get some people that watch wrestling and they're not the most active competitors wrestling, but typically most people that watch wrestling have some interest in wrestling or have some knowledge of wrestling, right? Previous, like maybe they competed or did it at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think you're always going to have that with grappling sports, but I think that you can make an event that would be palatable, because right now still most of the people that get into, watching events are typically the most hardcore, people. Like they're the more, they're the most hardcore jiu-jitsu nerds, right? It is what it is. Cause it's just the way it is. But if you could make it to where even people that aren't the most hardcore competitive nerds are interested in it too, that's a pretty good thing.
For sure. Yeah. I think, a big thing that made it huge or made it so like impactful was like when we walk in. I remember just walking in and you see like the mats and the lights and like just the crowd was huge already, but like the way they had it set up, they had giant screens. Mm-hmm. There was music, that a DJ kind of playing the whole time, which I don't know how I felt about that. We can get into that as well. Cause almost like when the music was off, it was a little bit of different feel, it was kind of quiet, almost like remind me of Pride fighting, like when it was really, really quiet. But it was like walking in, you're like, whoa, this is for real. Like this production, it's like a production. I mean, it's like a real, like going to a basketball game or an MMA fight, like a UFC event. Like that's what it felt like. And that made it, to me, I was like, well, this is unique.
Yeah, the production hands down was the best I've ever seen of a jiu-jitsu event. I mean, it was, you were looking at like a top quality like production value. I
Yeah, for
mean,
sure.
like it could easily that could easily have been like an old UFC back in the day, because the old UFCs used to do the pyrotechnics and stuff. It was very reminiscent of Pride. They had the
Sure.
drums going. They even had the old announcer woman who, you
Yeah.
know, I wasn't the only one that thought this, but I'm not the biggest fan of. I like her in like doses, but like when they
Yeah.
were doing, like they had a big opening ceremony, it was like, you know, all these competitors. It was just, it was a lot. But you know, they had Bruce Buffer on the final
Yes.
day. I mean, that was, you know, it was impressive. You know what I mean? And like, it was crazy. And even like the production value was there. And then even the excitement in that room, because it was such a large audience. There's something to when you get large groups of people together there. I don't know what it is. You could talk about it being like a vibe, energy, right? Like, you know, that kind of stuff. But I really think there is something to this energy that connects us all, because when I've experienced this a couple times, like say at like big MMA fights, or even at like at the pans or stuff like that, where like the whole damn arena's packed, right? Like if you go to like the last day of the pans, it's like hard to find a seat. You know, and there's probably like maybe 3,000-4,000 people up in the stands or
Mm.
something. Now you're looking up at when we were at UNLV, and I don't know how many people there were, but you
I
know,
think it was like 14,000. I
14,000,
think I heard it was
something like that, right?
14,000. Yeah.
And you know, when something would happen, like when Hakeem Rita got the submission on Cyborg, the whole crowd stood up on their feet, and I remember having like goosebumps.
It was
You know,
cool, man.
it was just intense. You know, and there were several moments like that, like where Amy Campo got the hooks in at the last second, and
Oh, it's
everybody was
beautiful.
just like jumping and going crazy, right? Like, I mean, it was such a it was an electric event. But again, one of the reflections I had, that was by far, that event had the best production value that I've ever seen at any jiu-jitsu event ever. It's not
Yeah.
even close. Not even close.
And I don't know if it came through like in like the TV, like people watching at home. Like I don't know if it came, if they could like feel or not even feel, but just like understand like the magnitude of the event. Like I think that like being there, you're just like, well, just feels different. It just felt like it was almost like when Amy got that last hook in, right? It was like somebody hitting like a last second like shot in basketball, right?
Right.
It was like a last second. It was just so cool watching that, and the excitement of it. And I mean, we even had people doing the wave, so that's how you
Yeah.
know you made it, right? People were doing the wave in the audience. It's ridiculous,
Yeah.
but
And you know,
but it was cool.
yeah, and you know, the overall, I thought it was probably one of the most exciting ADCCs ever. Not just because of the production value, but also I thought the matches for the most part were pretty good.
Yeah,
Most of the matches were really good. Some of the ADCCs can be sometimes kind of boring, um, because of the rule set. It can be the matches can be tough to actually score points, and it can also be tough to go because of how long the matches are. In particular. But one of the things that kind of was like something that, you know, for me was a negative was, I'm not the biggest fan of like the slap wrestling and kicking with no takedown attempts. So
hmm
one of the things that like you saw a couple times were like guys weren't, to me, it wasn't really, it was, you can call it hand fighting, I guess, but like they would be in a position where they would just literally club each other over the head, and they would kick the person's leg as if they maybe were going for a foot trip, but really there was no foot trip attempt. It was just basically they just kicked him. Like at one point, the dude threw essentially what I would consider almost a hook into like a leg kick, you know, and I'm not the biggest fan of that personally. Because again, I think it's one of those, and again, I'm all for rough and tumble grappling. And like, if you club someone over top of the head as hard as you can, and then you're going in for takedowns, I don't really care. But I think when you had matches where literally, you know, you'd have a 20-minute match and almost no takedown attempts were even tried, and you know that was it. It's like it makes for it may even as a grappling fan like me, it makes for a very unpalatable match. It's not fun to consume or watch. And I think that was I think that's a negative thing. And I don't know if it's always been that way. I'll have to go back and check, but I don't remember it being as blatant back in the old days of ADCC. I feel like it became like increasingly more of a thing after 2000, what is it, 2011 or 2009, when Paul Harris went against Dragoval and all those guys. I mean, because Paul Harris was just clubbing dudes. I mean, and then afterwards they would call him on it. He'd be like, "Oh no, big hug, it's okay."
Right.
But after he's like blasting people over their noggins, and so, I don't know. I have to go back and look because I want to see if that's always been the case. But it seems like it's become more and more of a thing, and I think it's something they need to kind of address. Because in one case, a guy got upkicked in the face, and no penalty was given or nothing. And again, what does that say to the competitors? That tells them I can basically punch a guy in the face, I can kick a guy in the face, and I can get away with it. Right. And again, so you have to hold those boundaries and you have to have clear examples of like what you can and can't do. And again, all accidents are going to happen. People are going to headbutt accidentally, all that stuff. But when you basically wind up from the hip and you slap someone on the face and you don't even do anything with it, to me, you're basically punching someone. And again, that isn't grappling. And, if you don't check that, it's going to slip. It's going to become a slippery slope where all of a sudden, basically, we're going to be doing like pancration style jiu-jitsu matches where people are going to be essentially fighting on the feet and then they're going to be grappling on the ground. And we'll talk more about this in a second, but I think that we would be, they were awarding penalties and negative points to people in positions where I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I would rather see them be more penalty like laxed with like the club wrestling and kicking.
Yeah, and I think the other thing it does is mess with the flow of the match. Like if you're clubbing and then the referee's got to step in like, hey, stop, or like you guys need to chill out a little bit, and which they did a few times in some of these matches. You have that match going on. There was a match, I don't recall who it was, but it was JT and PJ Barch. They were JT Torres, PJ Barch were on one, like mat 1 or mat 3, and then across the way was another match, two guys clubbing the shit out of each other. Yeah. And we were watching the JT and PJ fight. And it was smooth, man. They're like, they're kind of hand fighting. They're setting up their footwork, their grips. They're going for shots. It was smooth. It was flow. It was fun to watch because you can see them kind of setting things up. And the other side, the referee's like, you guys chill out because you're clubbing each other too much.
Yeah.
So you're clubbing, and you knew some guys that were out there. Like initially, you knew. And I think some of the bigger guys club a little bit more than the smaller divisions. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know why exactly that is. Speed could be a factor. Maybe slower to set up. I'm not sure. But it wasn't fun to watch because then the refs got to step in like, hey, y'all need to chill out. And they didn't I don't recall them giving any negatives for just clubbing, just clubbing and not going for anything. That's as much as stalling as anything, in my opinion.
Agreed. And, let people to let them know, don't think for a second that the PJ and JT match wasn't brutal because, afterwards PJ posted a picture of his face. From competing, and he was busted up. He looked like he'd been in an MMA fight after his matches. And again, for the most part, he had pretty smooth matches. But again, you're still being very rough with each other. But again, you're being rough with each other for a specific aim. Yeah, at the heavier weights, you typically see a lot more clubbing and a lot less activity from the feet. And again, I think that's a byproduct of it being the matches being simply too long. Because it's one of those things where, I mean, let's be honest, you can get bigger and more muscular, but your cardiovascular system and your lungs and your heart, they can only do so much. And so, smaller guys they always are typically going to have a higher work rate and can go a little bit longer typically than bigger guys. Bigger guys are going to typically slow down more because of the oxygen and blood demands that are going on. Right. And so, I think that, that's another thing too, is I think that the matches would be better served by being a slight bit shorter. Not because, again, and this is the way that I look at it, if we're going to, get into this, I just think that there's a sweet spot of maybe 7 to 10 minutes. And I think any grappler of any size can push the pace for that duration. Right. And, if you actually watch some of the ADCC matches, for the most part, they basically burn out 25 to 50% of the match time before they really start getting going. You know what I mean? Like they kind of move around. They do enough to not get called of stalling or whatever. And then usually when the points start or when they feel ready to go and they feel like they're in a time window where they can really push the pace, then they go. And again, this isn't everyone, but this is more common than not, right? And so I think that we would be better just saying, hey, listen, we don't need to have 20 to 40 minute long matches. Like there's no point. Let's make them shorter. and let's just tell people to go faster and be more strict on their work rate, right? And basically push people, because it's hard to tell people you're not working hard enough when you might have a 20 to 40 minute match. It's a little bit easier to say, listen, you need to start doing something because it's a 7 to 10 minute match, and let's go. To me, it's a little bit more fair to start calling a lot of penalties and a lot of stalling calls, because again, at a 20-minute match, I don't know anybody that can just go wide open for 20 minutes
Right.
and continue on to the next match. I mean, you have to be efficient with your body, and you have to make sure you pace yourself.
Do you like the no points section? I or part of the match? I don't know if because I think like you can risk some stuff, but also on the other hand, you don't want to show your best takedown or your best movement or give anything away. It's like almost like they're just like kind of like you said, feeling each other out for the first 10 minutes. And I don't know how I feel about that. Like I just don't know if the no points is that beneficial. I mean, yeah, you had Haisam had a an armbar very quickly off of a scramble kind of I don't know, man. Like there were some finishes like Gordon, had some obviously quick ones.
Yeah.
Craig had some quick ones, but like, I don't know. Like it seems like people that are more positional points heavy are not going to be doing that stuff in the no points part of the round.
Yeah, I like the idea behind it, which basically is like, hey, you have this duration of the match to just play around and do whatever you want, But like you're saying, it basically it disincentivizes certain things, because, for instance, takedowns are incredibly taxing to the body. It's an explosive move. It requires a lot of energy to effectively hit most of the time. And so you don't necessarily want to burn out a lot of energy in a non-points round where the points might start and then you got to score points, right? So you may just be a little bit more reserved. And that's what typically happens. Now, there's some people like Gordon who both has a mindset of wanting to be a submission artist, but also right at this point right now, he's heads and tails above everybody else. I mean, it's just insane. And so it's one of those things where, he can go out there and just do whatever he wants to do right now. But when the match is really close, you have to be much more methodical with that kind of rule set than just being loose and like just making space, which kind of goes into one of my other reflections, which is Kanan got there was no love for Kanan Duarte at the ADCC. Now, check this out. Disclaimer on this. I was cheering for Craig. I wanted Craig to win because I wanted Craig to get that first place finally. And I think he's a fun, exciting grappler, and he looked great going into that particular match. But in the finals match against Craig Jones, Kanan racked up, which to me is impressive 12-point lead. And he also racked up a unheard of and what I consider ridiculous 8 negative points. Now, to me, what was ridiculous about it was because if you watch the match and you don't have if you don't have a deep knowledge of guard passing, then you're watching that match and you're going, this is boring, right? But if you have a decent knowledge of guard passing, you're watching that going, okay, I see what's going on. So for instance, if you watch that match between Kanan, what he was doing was he was like Craig Jones for the most part during that event he came out really hard in the early on in the matches. I mean, you watch him with Marigala, you watch him in his other match. He didn't come out there to mess around. He came out there to finish people, right? Well, Kanan slowed him down, and Kanan played on Craig's strong side, and he controlled his bottom arm and his top foot, which basically stopped him from inverting, and it stopped him from attaching to his leg and attacking with leg locks. He basically wore him down for, the first half of the match. And then Kanan switched to Craig's weak side and passed. Again, I thought it was very masterful. He gets over into mount. And this is one of the ones where, again, this is really weird. So this happened to Gordon too, where Gordon got into mount and, he's holding a really tight position and the ref's telling him, doing the little hand circle, like, let's go, like, let's see action. Now, for me, I'm like, mount is a position where you cook people. It's not a position to just quickly move, because if you move too quickly, you're going to make space. And the same thing happened to Kanan where he's passing, and at one point they gave him a negative point as he was passing. He gets to mount and they're doing this thing like, okay, it's time. Like he hadn't even been in mount for a minute yet. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like I would rather see that level of come on guys, let's do this stuff when they're on the feet and they're not shooting for takedowns, they're not pulling guard, they're not grappling, they're not even going for takedowns. It's just basically hand fighting and slapping. And so for me, I would rather, and again, there were only a few of those matches with the clubbing stuff, so it wasn't the norm. But again, I didn't see during those matches, I didn't see any like hardcore negative points or any constant like, hey, go, go, go. But some of the guys on the ground, I think they were being unfair to them. And I think it would be better served to be a little bit more, hey, chop, chop on the feet and not on the ground as much. Because again, to me, like that was what Kanan was doing, was defending one of the best guard players, one of the best jiu-jitsu players in the world, was defending off of his attacks, waiting for his time so that Craig would slow down and be a little bit more tired, and then made his move and passed Craig's guard twice. Now, again, I like Craig and I wanted him to win, but he got beat. And the one sort of a side reflection maybe that I think that, a lot of jiu-jitsu matches that want to play these long rules would be to steal something out of like a wrestling book. Wrestling and MMA's playbook, right? So when you think of like wrestling matches or MMA matches, they're broken up into periods, right? Yep. So like for instance, we'll do an example of high school wrestling. High school wrestling, you have 3 2-minute periods, and you'll flip a coin and you'll either be on the up or down position. And then in MMA, obviously we have rounds, right? We have like 5-minute rounds instead of like a 15-minute fight per se. Pride used to have a 10-minute round with 2 5s, I think it was. And so again, different type of round systems, but a round system nonetheless. And I think that if you're going to do a really long jiu-jitsu match, I think that would be worth trying. I'm going to do a test run on like I want to do like a little competition and I want to test it out. But basically I've got a little rule set written down where part of it is that it's going to be included is a period system, because basically if under certain circumstances, we'll get it to the ground, and like we're going to basically flip a coin and you're either going to end up on the top or bottom of guard, which I think could be a really cool system, because then it's like, to me, it's like you're going to have to be a complete grappler, because what happens if you're the wrestler with great takedowns and then the coin flip comes and you end up on your back? Yep. What are you going to do? Right. And I think it would be an interesting system, because then you would be able to manually mix things up, where if you had a situation where guys are playing very, very conservative because of how long the match is, well, we're like, flip a coin. Okay. Now you got to go, because now we're putting you in positions, and it's not in such a bad position that it's going to be like, I think that, because the EBI does this, right, but what I'm saying is like, make it part of the match, not like an add-on, because essentially in EBI, there's essentially 2 matches in one. You've got your time limit match, which is a 10-minute, no points sub only, right? Mm-hmm. And then it has to the second thing, which is a submission based position, and you essentially have a point system, if you will, that's kind of basically, if you submit the person, then you get a point, like you get a point if you beat them, that kind of thing. Anyway, they don't have a point system, but basically they go off of who submits the fastest or who has whatever. So what I'm saying is make it part of the regular time limit match, and basically mix things up and basically do something to force the action if the competitors are not doing it. Because again, there is a part of it. I've heard people say that there is a part of it that's the culture, which is true, right? Because people will do just whatever they got to do to win. And obviously this is a part of the culture for some people, right? They will have the most boring matches ever, where they'll win on an advantage and they'll like open up their gi and scream and go nuts. But it's also part of the rule set. And I think that, if you want the rule set, because you look at wrestling, I mean, wrestling, like they will start calling stalling calls and everything else really fast. And so they make the guys go forward. They don't have a choice. Like they even have a shot clock where like you have, like, it's like friggin' basketball. You got a shot clock. If someone gets called, they'll have a shot clock where they have a certain amount of time where they have to go. Otherwise they will get a penalty. They'll get a point scored against them. And so I think you could do stuff like that, because one of the things that you did see that was useful about those negatives is, even though I think those negative points were wrongly given to Kanan, Kanan, like when he was at a point where he literally might lose to negative points, he picked it up and started passing again. Yep. And so to me, it's like, it could be used, but I think you have to structure the rules. And again, I think it's something that we really haven't nailed down yet in jiu-jitsu. It's still a relatively young competition sport, working with old rule sets that have been around for a really long time. I mean, like the ADCC rule set has been around for a while, And again, it was some guy who made it up. Like the sheet made it up. Hey, this is going to be our rule set. Well, who's to say we can't change it? Who's to say that we couldn't make it better? Same thing with IBJJF, right? We have a rule set that's based upon some old system that's been around for a long time. Who's to say it wouldn't be better if it was done differently? And so I think we're still trying to iron that out to make those rule sets a little bit better to make it more palatable to watch and for the average jiu-jitsu fan / practitioner.
Yeah, the other thing about the rule set is the scoring of takedowns. There's a couple of crazy little situations where we thought there were points, or there should have been points that were not awarded. AJ Agazarm, I think, had like a little bit of a tiffy. He was upset about not getting points for a takedown. And then actually we had the opposite where, who got points taken away? You got the
Dante
takedown.
Leon.
Dante Leon got points, and then like 2 minutes later or something got him taken away, which is insane. But like, it's so hard. Like, so these people, like these competitors get the takedown, and then if you turtle and you stay in that turtle for like what, 3 seconds?
3 seconds.
It negates that takedown. That's right. It. And which is insane. Like, I mean, once you're down, like if you want, we talked about this, if you want the grappling to simulate in some ways a fight, if you're in turtle, you're in a bad spot. It means you're getting hit in the head if there's strikes allowed. You know what I mean?
I mean, when I fought MMA, like when I went up, a position that I ended up in a lot was turtle. And man, I used to throw lunch boxes at people's faces with my fists. And I did some serious damage to people from turtle. Turtle is not a good position. It should be used for transition. But yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, the turtle is typically used as this neutralizing position. This is like in the IBJJF, it'll give you an advantage, but not a score. And in the ADCC, there are no advantages, so you just get nothing. And to me, it's so, if you're going to, like the ADCC obviously favors wrestling, and you'd like to see wrestling, like people go for takedowns. The problem is you have to have an incentive structure that benefits the person to do what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
This is the way that humans work. I mean, if you want to get a human to do something for you, you have to put together a incentive structure that is strong enough for them to want to do that task. Because if you do that, I mean, humans will just do whatever it works great. I mean, and this has been proven like through different psychological studies, and you can even watch it exist in like, in society, right? Like, I mean, like during like COVID last year or a couple of years ago, right? Where like basically people were drawing unemployment plus like their normal checks and all this stuff, and they were making more money not going to work, and then they're trying to get them to work again, and they're like, we don't want to go to work, I'm making more money right now. So of course the incentive structure is benefiting them by not going to work, so they're not going to. And so now in this grappling stuff, right? So when people were getting the takedowns, they would turtle up and they'd use all that energy, take the person down, get the person to the ground, but not get their points. And to me, I think jiu-jitsu in general should simplify the takedown rules. Basically, if you get locked up into a takedown battle, make it just like wrestling. Whoever ends up on top of the other person on the ground, that's a takedown. It doesn't matter who initiates. It doesn't matter anything. It just matters that like we got involved. We're starting on the feet, and then boom, we get engaged into this standing up grappling, and I end up on top of you. I get points. That's the way that it should be. It doesn't matter about turtle. Doesn't matter about side control. I'm on top of you. I took you from the ground or from the feet, and I ended up on top of you. That should be a takedown. Because that's what we're trying to word. That's what a takedown is. And wrestling, that's how wrestling does it, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you go to turtle or whatever, it just matters that I took you to the ground and got on top of you. And I think that's the way that it should be viewed.
Yeah, I think even giving 1 point. I mean, I don't know, like something, at least getting 1 point or having, I don't know.
I think make it simple, simplify it. Don't make it, because I mean, that's the whole thing. Like you can overcomplicate the damn rules.
That's true.
Because again, that's the thing. Like when I went back and watched the Dante Leon match, I was like, okay, like why didn't he get points? And I mean, Mika did get to turtle for a second, but I didn't think he was there long enough to justify, negating it. So then you're adding another step and to convolute this rule system where you can just say, hey, listen, like you took him down, like you initiated a shot, you end up on top of him, you get your points. Very simple. And I think it should be the same way with like IBJJF rules for the points too, where you say, listen, like, you took a person down and you're on top of them, boom. Like that's it. There shouldn't be, because again, when you add too many steps to it, it becomes so complicated and it muddies the waters, where you want to simplify the rules as much as possible so that you, again, think about this. We're trying to make this palatable to people to watch. If you've got to like study this rule system so like hardcore that just to make sense of it, you don't want that. Again, you want to make sure that it's very simple for the competitors, for the judges, and for the people at home watching. Because again, there's something interesting. You were talking about the pride rules, or the pride sort of vibe to it. Like during the finals matches, the whole auditorium was dead quiet, and except for the people making like drunk sort of comments.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you had this quiet auditorium, this quiet center, and you would see someone do something that to the average person who doesn't know jiu-jitsu, they would have not even responded, but you'd hear all the people would be, ooh, because everybody's educated on this thing that just happened. And so you want to have that effect where we all know what's going on. We all know why this is happening, and we can all basically play along at home, right? Because again, when you're watching a match, you're basically playing along. It just makes it a really overcomplicated system. And I think that, jiu-jitsu in general should just do away with this idea that if I take you down and you end up in turtle, that's not a takedown. Because again, that's not an ADCC thing. That's a jiu-jitsu thing. And I think it's like silly, because again, it's like that a takedown is a takedown. I took you to the ground. And if it was a fight situation, which is what this ultimately is kind of mimicking or sort of contributing to, I'm beating the brains out of you if you're sitting in a turtle position, not moving. It's kind of like years ago, Hiron Gracie went against Andre Galvao and in a Metamorph match. And, at the end of it, Hiron was like, talking about survival and this and that. And Andre at one point had mount on him, like was just holding it on it. And I was like, I was like, in my book, you should be escaping, because again, survival, like if it was a fight and you're in mount, you're getting your face beat in.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, it's like, I understand survival, but it's like, let's get out of this position. You know what I mean? And so I think that like rewarding someone for getting to a position where they could get where they can't see the person and they could get punched really badly, I think is a bad idea. I think it would be better just to like said, just that's a takedown. Just score a takedown. I took you down. You're down now. Now we're going to do jiu-jitsu. We're going to work.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like the athletes were so good at turtling and then fighting off the one hook with the
feet. Yeah.
So it was so many battles that we saw and for minutes upon minutes where like somebody had their back and they had one hook in. They played a lot of quarter guard was a big thing. Big control position was, or not quarter guard. I'm sorry. Halfback.
Yep.
The halfback position where you have one hook in and one hook kind of behind the leg, or one leg behind it, kind of almost like squeezing on the butt. And you have that position. And I think it was like such a great control position. There was no points from it, obviously, because all the athletes were actually so excellent at turtling automatically and fighting the one hook and not letting the foot come in.
Right.
And you'd see that. And I think like, obviously there's no advantages. So like you could be there and be in a really good position. It's not a standard quote unquote jiu-jitsu, like, control position. I mean, like points position.
Right.
But that was one of the things that I saw, like athletes were so good at turtling up, and they were so good at like fighting that last hook. And that was just the battle all the time.
Oh, yeah.
As far as upsets go, Ty and Felipe Pena in the open weight or the absolute, that to me was like probably one of the biggest upsets. Because he was the number 2 guy in his division. Ty went out in the first round against Josh Hinger. And so like it was kind of cool to see some of these guys almost like have a little redemption. And I think that was a very interesting match, the size difference as well. I think that was probably one of my biggest upsets there. Ty against Felipe. You got any that stood out to you? Yeah,
I mean, both Ty and Cade both have a furious work rate. I mean, those guys, like when I mean, it could be they're young and everything too. When you see them move, I mean, that's one of the things that they can do so well is push the pace on people. And they do it incredibly well. They're so fast and they keep moving. But as far as the upsets go, I mean, Giancarlo beating Mateus Denise.
That was
like,
huge.
I saw Giancarlo like before compete and I knew he was good. When he beat Mateus, I was like, oh, like he might win this damn thing, because Mateus was a returning champion, right?
Yes.
Mateus is very good, right? He's a very good competitor, and he didn't have anything for Giancarlo. I was like, oh man, like this guy might win it, because the 88 kilogram division, Craig was gone. Mateus was gone now. I mean, the whole thing just was open, right? So I was impressed with his performance and his upset. And I mean, he ended up winning the whole damn thing and looked very impressive doing it.
Yep.
And then there was another upset with, another upset. I'm just going down the upsets, not necessarily like the big ones, but my favorites or whatever. But like JT, one of my buddies, someone I was cheering for the whole time. He got put out by PJ, who PJ kind of, he had some ups and downs at the trials and stuff like that. And, he didn't go into that tournament looking like the guy that was going to put out the champion. You know what I mean? And he did. He beat JT, and I think he was probably the only guy on that side of the bracket that could have possibly taken JT down. I don't think anybody else on that side of the bracket would have taken JT down to the ground. I think PJ he had the wrestling to do it, and he did it, and it was a good win for him. You also had in the 99 brackets, right? Like you had guys like Felipe, he got put out by Nicky Rodriguez.
He looked good. He looked good. Nicky looked great until he met Gordon. I was like, up until that point, I was like, man, he looks like a killer. He was just like passing everybody's guard. He looked great. He looked, like moving. He was moving so well. He was explosive. And then Gordon just locked him in there. And that was it.
And I mean, and that's the thing is like, out of all those upsets, there's a lot. I'm curious, by the way, because of all those upsets, I'm wondering if we're going through a phase where there's going to be a changing of the guards, so to speak.
I think so.
Or is it just an off year for some of the champions? You never know, because like there's times where like in 2000, like you have these every now and then where you'll have this group of guys that's been in the ADCC for a while, and they're kind of holding down the holding down the turf, so to speak, and then you'll have some newbies come in. A great example, this is back in like 2003. Marcelo Garcia comes out of nowhere and starts choking guys, and it's like everybody's like, what the hell just happened? Who is this guy, right? And obviously he went on to have a long career, but there's also times where guys come out of the woodwork and then they do really well, but then you don't see them next year and they're kind of gone. So that happens too. So I'm curious to see how that plays out in a couple of years as the next one gets ready to load up.
Yeah, I mean, look at Cade, won his division. I mean, looked great, had a great match against Mika, and I mean, he did awesome. And then Ty got third in the absolute. So like, I mean, these kids are like, the thing about them, they're one of my favorite. Those two are some of my favorite to watch because they go for the finish. They're constantly going for the finish. Like, I mean, it's just so much fun. They're not like holding. I mean, they're getting positions, but then they're going for the kill every time, and they're so exciting and they move a lot. And so those younger guys, and even who's that guy's like Baby Shark, whatever his name is,
Souza.
He was like, dude, nobody really thought much about. He won his division too, and he looked really good, really good. I mean, of course, like, I
forgot another one. Amy Campo beating Gabby. Now
that's not an upset to me, dude.
That wasn't an upset to me either, because Gabby's dropped several matches in the last year. She wasn't the dominant person that she used to be. But at the same time, I think for a lot of people who didn't know who Amy was, I think that it like surprised them, like because unless you watch the trials and who she was, like everybody, I think going into they're kind of like, who is this person, and then I mean, she went out there and like, basically threw Gabby onto concrete and armbarred her, and so I was like, which was impressive, but you could tell, I think some people are like a couple people asked me, like, because I was talking about her, like, who is this girl? Where is she from? Like, and I think she came out of nowhere for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, you got to see her at West Coast trials.
Yeah. So
right? And she killed it. Yeah. She was so aggressive and she killed it. She looked amazing. And then we got her on the podcast. We got to talk to her a little bit. So we got to see her. You got to see her compete in person, and then she got to talk to her, get to know her. And I was like, dude, her mindset, her mind was like she was into it. She was very focused, very fun to talk to, kind of like a little bit shy, kind of quiet and reserved, but man, she's a killer, and she was a lot of fun. So I definitely wasn't surprised. And also, Gabby being so much bigger than the other competitors in her division. I mean, I think that can be advantageous to some extent, but she can't move as fast or go for as long as like Amy's, like, a pretty tall, but like a thinner, significantly thinner and smaller. And like her movement, not getting stuck underneath Gabby, I think was a huge thing. She was able to move and kind of, take her advantage when she had it.
Well, the thing that really impressed me about Amy was her, like, she's very dynamic with her takedowns, very dynamic with her guard passing. Like, I mean, like she's really good at that stuff. I mean, that was the thing that impressed me the most was her takedowns and then her ability to be dynamic with her guard passing. I mean, like she beat Elizabeth Clay at the trials, and Elizabeth Clay is a very good, like good guard player with great guard retention. And I mean, she just kind of dealt with it with no problems. And again, so I wasn't surprised to see her do that to Gabby as well. One reflection that I had, which is kind of interesting, and this is something for everybody to kind of like think about when you're training and also watching competitors. Watch the breath. There were several matches where I was watching the people, and basically what I was looking at was watching their bodies like breathing, like the respiration, and then watching the way that they were breathing. So for instance, if you go back and watch the Cade match with Mika, towards about that halfway point where Cade really started to push the pace, you'll start seeing Mika breathe a little bit heavier. And again, it's not to say that Mika's out of shape or anything like that, because he's not. It just goes to show you, like, you know, Cade's good at what he was doing. Because Cade kept basically just sort of, because Mika was being very active from the bottom, and Cade did a great job defending, and then started to push the pace. But the whole time, Cade was breathing through his nose. There was a couple times where he took some breaths in through his mouth, but almost breathing through his nose the entire time, which is really impressive. Again, to me, like, to understand that what that means that Cade never really kicked into his top end gear, because again, typically when you kick up into your top end gear, your body is going to default to mouth breathing to try to get the oxygen it needs and to offload the CO2. But he was breathing through his nose pretty much the entire time, and Mika was starting to breathe through his mouth. And there were a couple other matches like that where guys were breathing through their nose in one case, or then the other one was breathing through their mouth. Even if you watch like the Andre and Gordon match, I mean, you could just see Gordon was very relaxed, and his body, his breathing was very like slow and controlled. And you could see Andre's body, you know, going very fast. Again, keep in mind, I'm an Andre fan. I don't dislike Andre. This is just sort of watching it. And this is important. If you actually train, sometimes you'll be able to notice this. Anybody that's ever been in a competition who's felt this before, where you can hear the guy breathing heavy and you know, oh man, they're almost done or they're cooked, and you really start to push the pace. Or even sometimes when you're rolling, one of the things I try to do is, if I go up against someone where I know I'm going to have to play it smart for a little bit because they're going to come at me kind of wild or something, I will breathe through my nose like, not that I don't breathe through my nose a lot anyway, but I'll make sure that I breathe only through my nose, so I kind of keep myself limited to a certain degree. And, you know, I won't allow myself to breathe through the mouth until after a certain period of time. And if I start getting like feeling like I can't get a good breath, then I slow my rate down first, so that this way I don't try to push it too hard. There's some big guys sometimes that are really big and strong, and sometimes where I want to decide to play it safe. But either way, if you watch matches and you see someone breathing very, very heavy and the other person isn't, that typically lets you know that that person is getting the worst of the exchange, and they're starting to lose. They're starting to basically wear out. You can think of it as a car where, you know, if you could look at the dials of a car, and the cars are kind of neck and neck for a second, but one car's gas is starting to drive down and their engine's starting to whine and they can't go anymore, that's letting you know, like, that car's eventually going to lose. It's not going to be able to keep up. Now, there are exceptions, because sometimes you can get a submission and it all ends like that. But in a lot of cases with these longer matches, when you start seeing someone breathe heavier, that typically means that that person's going to be the loser, because they're not going to be able to maintain the pace unless they get some sort of like sweep or something that really changes everything.
Yeah. Is there, let me ask you this. Is there someone that you thought was the most impressive performance, just the most impressive tournament altogether?
I would say, gosh, man, it's kind of hard, but I would probably in my eyes, the most like so in my eyes, probably the most impressive performance was Giancarlo. This was his first ADCC ever, right?
Yeah.
And then you look at the submission rate he had. He had a rear naked choke against Barbosa. He had a arm bar. Actually, he did do the open. You asked me if he did the open. He beat Hasim Rita.
Yeah.
And then earlier and then he ended up losing to Marigali by points. But in his division, he beat one guy by points, he beat Mateus Denise by triangle choke. He beat Eoin Flanagan by a steamer lock, and then beat Lucas Barboza by a rear naked choke. That's a pretty impressive like run, bro. I mean, like, and he didn't even get, like, in his division, he didn't get a point scored against him. That's very impressive. And then I think you could probably make another sort of maybe equal to kind of performance with Cade, as Cade basically he submitted all his opponents. He had 3 heel hooks, or he had 2 heel hooks. He had an arm lock. And then in against PJ, I didn't see this match. It says other, but with Mika, he heel hooked him. With Roberto Jimenez, he got a heel hook. And then he armbarred lock on Giles. I mean, bro, that's really friggin' impressive to submit all those people. I mean, that's really like impressive. So I mean, for me at least, looking at it, I thought Cade and Giancarlo probably had the most impressive performances. And then I mean, there's Gordon.
That's what I was gonna say is Gordon. Like, he's the most impressive to me because he was so dominant. But we don't say that because we expected it from him. But like, he took out probably the greatest ADCC champion competitor. I think Andre Galvao was the greatest. And then, because I just think he's won so many. He's won like his division. He's won the open. He's won super fight after super fight. Like, I think the way that he did it, like he took his back and, like you said, he cooked them. Man. He had like, and Galvao did great defending with one arm, his neck with one arm, having his back taken. But like the way that Gordon did it, like it was just crazy. I think he had maybe one decision was his first match. I think he was maybe just kind of warming up or something, but everything else, I mean, I'm like, geez. I mean, to do that, to win his division the way that he did, and then win, the super fight, and I was like, we looked past it a little bit. But man, he looked so much better than everybody else. It was just absurd. It didn't make any sense. I was like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, even the people he trains with don't even look like they're, they were not as dominant as he was against his opponents.
Yeah. I think, I guess with Gordon's, I mean, like, Gordon's shown what he could do. And so for me, like, what was impressive about those young guys coming out is like, it was their first ADCC and they won. Right. Like, I mean, Cade is the youngest ADCC champion ever. And Giancarlo, that was his first ADCC and he won the damn thing. I mean, it's very, very impressive. Gordon's is impressive, but Gordon's is like, to me, like, it's going back and looking at Gordon's like first like ADCC win, his first title. That's what you're looking at with those guys, right? To me, Gordon right now, looking at what he's doing is almost like legacy building, right? It's like basically this guy's on a different level, and it just is what it is. But those young guys coming in, having their first ADCC run and just winning, like, it's super fucking impressive. And the way that they did it was very, very decisive. It wasn't like a fluke. It wasn't like, oh man, they got a really weird point or something. It was like, no, they submitted most of their opponents. Like, that's pretty good. And with Gordon, it was impressive because, again, he dismantled, like, especially on the last day. His first day, it was whatever. Because, again, like you said, I think he was warming up. It's what I would imagine. I don't know.
I think so.
But he had the Finnish guy who I think he submitted the Finnish guy, and then he went against Victor Hugo, and I think Victor Hugo was a decision. And then that was the first day. The second day, he went against 2 more people, and then he went against Andre in the finals. And again, in all those matches, he looked as relaxed and comfortable as possible, and they were very fast. I mean, the longest one was the Andre match, and it, that was still relatively quick.
Like 13 minutes, I think.
13 minutes, right. Whereas the first match he had against the guy from Fight Sports was like over in 20 seconds. And then he went against Nicky Rod, and it was a couple minutes. And then he went against Gordon. And another sort of fun thing about, like, say, playing the rules, which, again, maybe if you guys don't think about this. So in the finals matches of ADCC, or in the super fight matches of ADCC, if you pull guard, you'll be awarded a negative point, right? Well, so Gordon let both Nicky Rod and Govaldas take him down. Like, he didn't even try to defend it. He literally just fell back. Now, what did that do? That allowed him to, quote, pull guard, maybe, but without
I
actually
never thought of that.
Yeah, it was a very smart way to play the rules, because basically he let them, because I mean, watch him go against Andre. He just flops back. Same thing with Nicky Wright, just flops back, like, go ahead and take me down because this is where I want to be anyway. But he didn't want to start the match off with a negative point.
Right. I never even thought about that, because like he did. Yeah, he got taken down, but there was no points. It was a no points time.
Very smart, bro. And so it allows him to play the rules.
Smart. And here's another. Go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good.
So another person that I think played the rules extremely well, probably better than anybody, is Yuri Simões. Yuri won the absolute scored 2 points, 2 points in all of his matches. He won. And
I'm going to double check because I know we were
double
talking about
check
that
it.
the day of. I'm going to double check to make sure we're not saying anything that's not true. I want to double check it. Though.
Yeah, and but Yuri, you know, had close matches and just he won. I mean, that's impressive because he played the rules very well. His wrestling, his defensive wrestling was very good. You know, he wasn't giving up a lot of stuff. He did really well. I mean, whether you like it or not, he didn't make a bunch of finishes, but he won.
Yeah, so he had 2 points. He had a good double leg against Cyborg. The rest of them were decision wins. And they say points, which I'm going to double check here. I think they mean like negative points or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But but basically, he didn't actually score any points in the rounds. You know, which I think is it's
playing
crazy.
The rule set, man. He did it. He played the rule set better than most people.
And that always happened because I remember like back in the day when I was a kid, like a teenager, when I first got into, you know, jiu-jitsu, I remember going to the ADCC website and they would actually have so he beat Nicholas Marigali because Nicholas Marigali had 2 negatives. So he did the same thing with Lachlan. But he actually didn't score, right? And he was still doing stuff. But I mean, it's one of those things where playing those rules, that's a thing. And knowing the rule set, knowing the whole thing. And it's why, like, a lot of times what I tell people, like, when it comes to jiu-jitsu competitions, it's not necessarily who's the best at jiu-jitsu. It's about who's the best at playing the game and knows the rules and everything else. Right. It's, you know, I heard Gordon say this on like a podcast where he's basically talking about the sub only time limit. Like, it's atrocious to watch, but if you want to find out who's the best at jiu-jitsu, that's it. Right. And, you know, I mean, technically that's kind of truthful, right? It's like you just go until someone gets submitted. There is no escape. We just go until we submit each other. Maybe you say it's the best with cardio or whatever. I don't know. But nonetheless, like with a point-based thing, sometimes there's guys that weren't very, like, back in the day, like, you used to have this used to be notorious. Like the ADCC, you would have wrestlers that would come in who weren't really good at submissions, but who would know how to play the rule set, and they would win. And I mean, even early Brazilian jiu-jitsu tournaments, you know, you'd have wrestlers sometimes roll in for the Nogi day, and they would win some of the big matches just by beating people in points and staying out of submissions. And so again, you got to know how to play the points. And so this is why it's important to, if you're going to compete, to almost roll in your gym as if you're going to compete on that rule set that day, and not just give things up, or be mindful how things would be if scored in your mind, because it's important.
Yeah. Did anything surprise you? Like, just being there, like the environment, anything was like surprise you, or like you think was done? I mean, we kind of talked about things that were done exceptionally well. You know, obviously the production. I think some of the complaints were that things ran a little late, you know, or ran a little over. But it's so hard to, you know, if you have a 20-minute, potentially, you know, in the first rounds or the first couple of rounds, you have a potentially 20-minute match, I believe, or is it 15? It was 10 and then 5, right?
Yeah.
So potentially 15-minute match, or you could have like a 2-minute match, or, you know, a 20-second or whatever. It's like, it's very hard to kind of like get all that to balance out and to figure out what's going to happen when. So like, you have a couple matches that are those snoozers and they go the full distance, then, you know, it can run you late. So I think they did really well. Like, I really liked the way that they turned the music off for the final matches. I thought that was very cool. Obviously, there were some idiots kind of yelling stuff. Do you think the music was distracting to some of the athletes? Do you think it bothered any of them? Like, do they like it better with or without? And also, we haven't really talked about, because these guys are most of them are seasoned competitors. We haven't talked about, did they get nervous, like going out there and seeing 14,000 people in the stands, like the lights, the music, the crazy, you know, pyrotechnics? Did that mess with anybody?
Well, so as far as the music goes, I mean, when you train in the gym, do you listen to music?
Yeah.
So I don't think the music makes a damn bit of difference. I think if anything else, it probably gave more energy. I mean, like for me, like, you know, sometimes sometimes I feed off of music that plays. Like if there's a beat to it, it kind of like I've actually done this where like I've played more chill music and I've played music with a harder beat, and the rolls are different. Like when the rolls, like if I want people to have more of a playful, like flowy day or whatever, I'll play some music that's kind of almost got like a smooth kind of rhythm to it, and it's like super chill, and that kind of stuff. And then, if I want people to go a little harder, we'll listen to maybe some harder hip hop or some rock music or something like that. So I think the music was fine. I don't think there's any problem. Honestly, it was even enjoyable for me to watch or listen to.
Yeah.
For the most part, because luckily, like at the trials in the West Coast, they had a lot of like the robot music playing, that wow, 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 like that kind of stuff. And that stuff I can't stand. But most of the music that they had playing was pretty easy to listen to. As far as the nerves, I'm sure maybe someone got shook up by it, but I would be surprised because, dude, as soon as you start rolling, you're just going. And most of those competitors have competed in the ADCC before, or competed at trials, or have competed at some big tournaments. And honestly, man, you just don't even know. Like, you don't even notice it. Like, at a certain point, if you compete, you just don't. It's like you've got such tunnel vision on what you're doing. You don't even notice the fans. You don't even notice people. I mean, hell, I remember like my first MMA fight was in Louisville, and it was in front of like 3,000 people, which isn't a big number, but it was big for the times.
Sure.
And it was at the time, it was the biggest crowd I have ever competed against or in front of. And I didn't even notice it. It didn't even factor into the equation at all. What was probably the most nerve-wracking, and I've competed against like some bigger events. Like I remember competing on the second day of Pans and like looking up at the crowd, and it was packed. It was huge amount, or not the second day of Pans, but the second black belt day of Pans, where all the black belt, everybody's out and the stands are packed. It's so loud. Didn't factor into it. The only time I've ever been like ultra nervous for a competition was when I was a black belt and competed with like 60 of my students on the corner watching. That was the most nerve-wracking time I've ever been in. Like everything else, because those fans, I don't know them. Like, I don't care. Like it is what it is. But I'm sure it bothers someone, because we're all a little different. One of the as far as the production though, the production, they were great. I mean, all the stuff that they did, to me, it ran pretty damn smooth. Sure, maybe it was a little slower for some people on the East Coast, because again, I know if I was at home, I probably wouldn't have been able to make it for the finals. But overall, I thought it ran so smooth, because I mean, there weren't really any crazy hiccups. I thought Seth and Mo did a great job running the damn thing. So hats off to them. The only thing that was surprising to me, and this is like just for me, was the amount of pictures that I took. Like that was probably the most pictures I've ever taken, like in a 2-day period in my life. Like, I mean, hundreds of pictures, hundreds of people talking to people. And like, it was weird to like walk around and like constantly being stopped by like groups of people. It was different. I mean, cause usually I go to competitions and I still get stopped a bunch, but this was different. Like a lot of you listen to the podcast, you were there, coming up and, saying hey and stuff. And that was wild.
It was cool.
It happens, but that was the most that's ever happened before.
Yeah, it was like to the point where like a couple of people would see you and they'd come in, and then people would see that you're taking a picture of someone, like they caught their attention, and they'd come in, and it was just then you have like a crowd of people. And one time you were standing in one line, or there was a line in front of you, and then Jocko was right next to you. There was a line in front of him, and you guys were just like, it was like, oh man, it was very cool to see, because we got stopped. We got stopped on the plane going to the venue. We got stopped, or I'm sorry, on the plane going to Vegas. We got stopped in the airport to take pictures. And when we got to Vegas, I think
the elevator,
we got stopped in the elevator. We got stopped in the hotel. We got stopped going to the hotel, coming from the hotel. And it was very cool to witness, because I fanboyed out as well. Like there was like Henzo Gracie was walking around, and like I was like, this is crazy, or Nate Diaz was walking around, just kind of hanging out with people, and just the fighters. Everybody was very cool. And the thing that like wasn't even surprising, but it was just like how willing people were to like stop and talk and engage, and like I think it took some people off, like you asking, like somebody would come up to you and you're like, hey, what's your name? And like, what? You're asking me like how long I've trained? What? It was kind of cool to see that interaction. And just to witness that, to experience that, and also witness that. And it was a very cool environment. I think we talked about the environment being unique, because most of the people there, if not all of them, were jiu-jitsu athletes of some sort. They train. But a lot of even the guys that were, and the women that were there that weren't competing, so they're kind of more of in a relaxed atmosphere. They're just they're watching the ADCC. They're a fan like everybody else, and it was very cool because they're more approachable. I think because everybody was. It wasn't like such an edge. Like sometimes you'll see like an intensity in the air, like at a competition.
Right.
Everybody's kind of on edge a little bit. They're intense, but it was more like laid back for a lot of the people that were there just to witness it and watch.
Yeah, I think when you go to like a regular jiu-jitsu competition, you can walk into a room and you instantly kind of get a feel, ooh, something's up. And I'm sure that's probably some sort of I'm sure someone could explain this. There's probably like one guy told me this, my buddy told me that when we are in a more heightened stress level, we actually give off different, like there's different like levels of chemicals that come through our sweat, like ammonia and stuff like that. And he was basically saying like next time you compete or whatever, like see what your gi smells like. It'll probably have more of an ammonia smell to it because of the fact that you're in a more heightened stress situation. I don't know that to be true, but it would make sense because to me it's like, we're creatures of nature. And I'm sure at some point we probably got really good at some point back in our more, primitive times, got good at like noticing smells. And I'm sure we could like smell when something was up, right? Like where someone was secreting some sort of different balance of chemicals. So I've always interpreted it to be this, like when you walk into a room, you can almost like, they'll say you smell it in the air, right? Like you can walk in and you're like, okay, I'm at a competition. And like you said, at most competitions, everybody's competing. So like the whole room is full of people that are on edge. Whereas at this one, it was 14,000 people that were just excited to be there hanging out. And then there were like, the competitors were the minority and they were kind of put into their own little space away from everyone, and so again, that was the difference. And so everybody was just kind of hanging out, chilling, enjoying the show. And there was a very relaxed sort of vibe with everyone. And jiu-jitsu competitors and jiu-jitsu, we'll call them celebrities for lack of a better term, they're generally pretty chill because jiu-jitsu is not as big as other stuff. So like, when, for instance, Hodger Gracie, if Hodger Gracie's walking down at the grocery store, most people don't give a damn, right? But when he's in a jiu-jitsu event, people are like, oh my God, it's Hodger Gracie. And again, for all of us, it's good to be recognized, even for these high level competitors. It's good to be watch. I mean, even the high level competitors that competed this weekend, when they were walking around after it was all said and done, they were more than happy to take pictures and chat with people and all that stuff. Even Gordon Ryan was walking around like he was walking to get his medal at the podium, and everybody's like trying to like give him a handshake and talk to me. He's like, hey guys, I'll be right back. I got to go get my medal. He was very courteous to them.
He was great.
And again, this is like the Michael Jordan of our sport. And so again, I think that's a really cool thing about jiu-jitsu because of the fact that it is still relatively small niche. These guys aren't so recognizable that they've grown to hate attention, right? And so whereas I'm sure if like it was like an actor where you can't even go walk into a restaurant without people freaking out, it might be a little bit overwhelming at times.
For sure. Yeah. Well, let's end it on this. Do you have like something that's going to stand out in your mind, like a favorite memory or something that maybe is you took back with you to, I mean, I think like just the whole experience, it'd be hard for me to pick something. I just enjoyed meeting people and just constantly like, everybody was so cool. And I mean, obviously the atmosphere and the matches were incredible, but was there something for you that like stood out more than anything? Like a moment?
Yeah, I don't think that there was so much going on because like, for instance, there were so many like jiu-jitsu people that we've met, that we've talked to on the internet, that we got to meet for the first time. There were so many people that I got to meet whom I've talked to on Instagram. Like there was one guy who was getting ready for his black belt who I gave him some tips, over like voice chat and Instagram. And he was like, hey bro, that helped me out a ton. And there was a lot of those, and then the matches were amazing. And there were so many times where I was on my feet cheering for people and screaming, and it was great. And I just think that was one of those things where it would be hard to try to boil it down to like one most memorable experience. Because from a spectator, there were so many different flavors to enjoy, right? Like you could enjoy the crazy matches, the production value, these upsets that were going on, the community and the environment, the going back and talking to all the people in the booths, from Future Kimonos and We Defy and all this different stuff. There's so much going on that it would be hard to possibly boil it down to one experience. So to me, it's like it just sort of has like its own little category in my brain. So
Yeah, I definitely I agree. Like it was very cool meeting people, and it was cool watching you interact with people. Just like everybody was super happy, super cool. The matches were excellent. Production was awesome. The environment was great. We got to, go have some dinner with like Matt from Epic Roll and Rob from McDojo Life. That was awesome talking to them, because that was actually one of the fun parts. That was like the first night watching you and just like sitting and having dinner, and you and Rob sharing these funny stories from like all these crazy ninjas like back in the day, just the silly stuff. And we're gonna have Rob and Matt on the podcast, and I think we're gonna have to rehash some of those stories that y'all were talking about, because they're hilarious. It's just, minus social media at that time, no social media, and like it's like you had the magazine scene was very big, black, like different magazines and stuff. It's just crazy, man.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was a great experience altogether. We didn't do a lot of going out because it was like late every night, and we were still kind of trying to adjust but Matt said the after party or whatever was very cool. Hanging out. He hung out with Gordon and Nate Diaz and some people there, which was very cool to hear him share some of that. So, but it was fun, man. It was a great experience. I would definitely do it again. I would definitely I'm like, oh man, that's like a destination thing.
Next time we'll like, if we go, we'll have to make sure that we give ourselves like a day, like come back the day after. So like if the ADCC ends on Sunday, we come back on Tuesday. Because for my main reason for like, I could have possibly stayed up if need be. I could have just started drinking a little bit. But for me, it's like, it's one of the things where I've noticed this, that I only seem to get sick when I don't get enough sleep. Or if I drink too much and not get enough sleep. It's like, it's basically, as long as my sleep's good, I don't really get sick. And so like for me, like I knew we were gonna have to fly out that morning, and I don't like drinking a ton anyway, and sleep's really important to me. So I was like, if I go out to this after party, I'm gonna get maybe 2 hours, 3 hours of sleep. That doesn't seem like a good idea, and I don't want to be in an airport and then come back home and be sick. When I get back. So I was like, I'll just sit this one out, and next time where we can have a day to just literally sleep in and catch up. You know what I mean?
I think we prioritized recovery, prioritize like taking care of ourselves, not being, because we have to get back to it. And like when we got back pretty late on Monday night, and then I had to go get up and get the kids to school. I had the day off, but I got the kids to school and got a little training in, and I was like, even then, like it was a fairly light training session, but I was like sweating. Like I was like, man, I'm like sweating pretty. Like I think I'm working way harder than like. And I was kind of, it just takes a little bit. The time difference, it takes a little bit of adjustment. And I think like, you're right. You have like, we got to get back to integrate back into normal life. And I think having even a day to kind of collect your thoughts, like kind of be like, all right, let's relax, kind of reflect on everything, I think it would have been nice. So, but it was a great experience, man. It was awesome.
All right, guys. So hope you enjoyed the podcast today. Again, hopefully some of the ideas I shared, one, maybe just got you to think a little bit, maybe for your own competitions, as far as how the rules might work, and maybe getting you to study up on the rules a bit more. And then also along with that, maybe getting you to think about some different ideas for your training, as always. Because again, like, for me, there were a few things that I knew, like, was like, okay, I need to start training the guys on these things as we get back to it. But again, if nothing else, hopefully it was just entertaining to you. So that's that. So again, guys, thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. charlottesweb.com. Check them out. If you've never tried CBD products, give it a go. Try the product out for a month. See how it works for you as part of your recovery, just like it does for me and Eugene and many of the people that listen to the podcast. Usually we get messages from people, like at least I do, like once a week, where people have used CBD products from Charlotte's Web, and they're like, hey, this stuff is really good. I started using it. I appreciate the recommendation. So again, just passing that off to you. If you'd like to try any of their products and get 20% off, go to their website at charlottesweb.com, and the promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off. Also, if you were looking to get any t-shirts, gear, rash guards, fanny packs, I mean, whatever, anything jiu-jitsu related with cool designs and high quality stuff, check out epicrollbjj.com. The promo code for that is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly and get access to a really cool warm-up routine that Eugene did, you can go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And along with including tons of exclusive content from the podcast, from little trips we've been on, and guys, just everything, right? With the guests that we've had over the years, you'll also get access to a warm-up routine that Eugene did. So if you're someone that would like a routine to work on your flexibility, your mobility, specific to jiu-jitsu functions, it's a really good 20 to 25 minute routine that you can use. And you could always extend it, make it longer with longer holds and more movement. But again, the routine that we did originally was about 20 minutes. Eugene did it for some campers at my events that I had at my gym. I really like it. I use several of the exercises that he showed during that day all the time now, because they are so beneficial to the problems that we have. Jiu-jitsu practitioners have very unique issues that they run into with their shoulders, their hips, their low back and stuff like that. And it's all interconnected. And so if you could do some work just to help address those, it can help improve your recovery, and it can also help prolong your ability to train for a long period of time, right? Again, if you start training and you get all these muscular imbalances and then your body starts breaking down, well, training's going to grind to a halt very quickly. And so having something to correct that would be very useful. And this warm-up routine is something that can definitely be a part of your daily or every other day routine to help sort of curb those issues. And again, you can get that at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And last but not least, guys, you can get access to my free ebooks that I give away and get my daily email newsletter by joining my Chew Crew email list at my website at jujitsu.net/join, JOIN. And again, 3 free ebooks, and you'll get exclusive, you'll get an email newsletter sent to you every day with stories and also offers I don't release anywhere else. And so guys, that's it for the podcast today. Hope you had a good time with us. Thank you so much for joining us. And also all those that came out to the podcast or to the event this past weekend at the ADCC, who came up and said hello, and we shook hands, we chatted for a second. It was awesome to meet you guys. And again, if any of you are out there, if you ever see me out in an event, feel free to come up and say, hey. The only exception is that if I'm getting ready to compete and you see me with my headphones in, kind of leave me alone. But assuming that's not going on, if you want to come up and say, hey, come up and say, hey, I would love to chat with you, love to meet you, and just exchange a few words. It's always fun to meet the people on the other end of this, this little experiment that we're doing with the podcast. And so that's that. And again, appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you next week.